So far I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, we've, with not too much setup, we've created some objects, saved them into the database. We've done some querying against the database, and we've used this Aurelius data set to bind the results coming back from that query into our user interface. Yet our code in here, there's no real database code. It's all object code. Yeah, so I think this is really nice. Yeah, all of the business logic can live in my business objects, in my customers, in my orders, that sort of stuff. My UI logic can stay in my forms. There's nice clean separation between where the logic for these things live. Yeah. Now, that's all great, but you've got to admit my object model is pretty basic. Yeah. So let's make it less basic. Let's create another class. And this is going to be a T contact. And let's put some properties on that. Contact should have, I guess, a first name, which would be a string. Last name, also a string. Let's do something other than a string. Date of birth, T-date. Okay. And again, let's tell Aurelius that A, this is something that it needs to manage, that it's an entity, and that it should use auto mapping for this guy. Yep. But then we want to link these two together. Yeah. So there's a few ways to do this. And the way that I'm going to do here is, to be honest, probably not what I would do in a real application, but we'll come back to that in a future session, just for the purposes of learning Aurelius. Let me do something like, let's create a property. Yeah, let's do a property called contacts. Okay, but this is not going to be a single contact. This is going to be a list, a relation, like a one-to-many relationship. Yeah. So the type of this is not a T-list of T-contact. It's not a T-contact. It's a T-list of T-contact. Yeah. But again, these aren't special Aurelius classes. These are just Delphi classes, and we'll get that by saying get contacts. Okay, and we'll just have it that way. Okay, doesn't know what a T-list is. So I better tell it. T-list is from generics.collections. Okay, happy, good. And I'll give it a private field. If contacts is of type. Okay. Actually, let's clean this up a little bit. Let's go straight to the field. But I better create the list. Yeah. So let's put in a constructor and a destructor. Again, I really love the fact that I'm not doing very much special Aurelius stuff. I'm just doing plain old Delphi objects. Yeah. And if you were going to have one of your fields be a T-list of T-contact, you'd probably override the constructor and instantiate it, and override the destructor and destroy it. Yeah. So let's do that. I'll say f contacts is equal to T-list
tcontact.create. I don't think there's any, I won't give it any parameters. And then I'll destroy it. Yeah. Now notice I'm not creating it as an object list. Yeah. I'm just creating it as a T list of tcontact, not a T object list of tcontact. Again, that's because, like I said before, Aurelius is managing the lifetime of these objects, not me. Yeah. So here, where I free fcontacts, I'm freeing the list. I'm not freeing the contacts in the list. Yeah. Okay. I thought I got rid of get contacts. That's probably class completion being helpful. Let's probably put it back in for me up here somewhere. Yeah, there we are. Let's get rid of that guy. All right, we're happy. Now, the only thing we're not happy about is, let me go back out to my object. I need to do a couple more things. And again, the first of these, or actually all of these, you probably wouldn't put in a button in your user interface. Let's have a button here to update DB. Yeah. So this time when I run it, I'm going to tell it to check the database and see if it has the necessary structure to store the objects. So I think it's, update database, there we go. You can, as part of update database, it'll do this call called verify database. You can just call verify database directly. So if you wanted to not just automatically update it, but check and see if this database structure is right, and if it's not, fail with some reasonable error messages, or even just respond. You can call verify database and then get a list of all of the errors that it found in the database, and then respond how you want to respond. But in this case, I'll just call update database. Yeah. The second thing I want to do is I want to create some contacts. Yeah. So here, where I let's do L contact. Here, where I've created my customer, let's also create a contact. L contact becomes equal to create. What do I call it? Oh, first name is equal to, what's this, Acme? So let's go Wiley showing my age here probably. My kids would not know who Wile E. Coyote was. What else did we put on the contact? Oh, there's a date of birth, wasn't there? Yeah, that's right. Who knows what Wile E. Coyote's date of birth was. But let's do encode date. Let's take a shot. 1960 maybe? Maybe it's a bit later than that. All right, that'll do. All right. Oh, last thing I do, I want to create, I've created a contact, but I'll say L customer dot contacts dot add and give it L contact. Okay. Then when I save L customer, it'll both save the customer and also the contact. Now, I'm probably going to end up with some duplicates here because I've already inserted Acme. So let's change the name a little bit. So let's make it Acme Inc. So later on I'll know what the name of which of the Acmes in the database. I could blow away the database, I guess, but this will be fine. We'll have an Acme Proprietary Limited and we'll have an Acme Inc. That's no problem. So let's run this and see if I've forgotten to do anything. I'm not going to click Create DB, but I'm going to call Update DB. I have forgotten to do something. Okay, but this is good. See, during the process, when I've told it to go off and validate the database, or update the database, and it's going to do a validate database, it needs to know how to import the schema of the database to do the comparison. So actually just do it again so I can see the message. So it's telling me that for it to do that, I need to give it a user's clause, yeah, to tell it what SQL dialect it's using. Sorry, let me read that a third time. Aurelius.schema.interbase, probably. Okay, so let's add that. Yeah. Settle down. I could tell you I did that on purpose, but I really didn't. So I think I can just do that here. Aurelius dot schema dot interbase. I assume that'll be okay just to do it there. So let's try again. Okay, let's update the DB. Cannot find mapping. Oh, I didn't give. All right. Remember I told you that the default behavior is that these classes need an ID? I didn't give contact an ID. So let's give it one. ID. We'll go with the defaults again. FID, right, FID. Okay. All right, third time lucky. Must be getting late here. Yay. So let's come over and have a look. Before, all we had was our customer table. Let's refresh it now. We've now also got a contact table with the fields that we would suspect, along with, we've got our first name, last name, date of birth, and ID. We've also got the ID of the customer that it's related to. Yep. So that's the foreign key, I guess, into the customer table. So it's created that for us. If I now create my objects, that contact table will be empty at the moment. But if I now create my objects, when I go into my customer table, let's have a look. Let's view it. I've got two of the code partners, that's fine because I didn't remove that other one. But I've got an Acme Proprietary Limited and an Acme Inc. If we look at this, Acme Inc. is ID 3. So if we go into my contact table and view it, we've only got one contact in there. That makes sense, but it's got an ID of 1, but the customer ID that it's linked to is 3, which is the right one. Okay, awesome. So we've now got a more complicated, still very simple, but more complex object model stored in the database. Let's update what we have in our UI to see if we can reference it. Now on that first example, where we were retrieving our customer by ID, all I'm going to change is add a second label here. And in that label, I'm going to also display .caption. I'm going to say lcustomer.contacts.count. So the number of contacts that it has. Yeah, so that's pretty straightforward. And if it's not, let's just be complete. If it doesn't find the ID, if it doesn't find a customer with the ID that we specify, I'll say label2.caption is equal to blank it out. Okay. Down here, what I'm going to do is actually set up another data set. So we're going to have a master detail set up. Okay, so let's create another data set. It's going to be for the contacts. Let's create another data source. And let's drop down another grid. DB grid. Okay, I'll just stick him under there. Okay, so let's connect our grid to data source number 2. Let's connect data source number 2 to data set number 2. And let's connect our data set when we don't want to load, whereas with this data set we loaded it from the criteria in the code. Yeah, I don't want to do that. What I want to do is connect this to basically the contacts field inside this data set. Yeah, this data set represents all our customers. They have a list, each of those customers has a list of contacts. I want to point this data set at the contacts list for the currently selected customer. At the moment I only have one field set up in here called name. Yeah. What I'm going to do is add another field called contacts, and its type is going to be somewhere in here. There's one called dataset. There we go. Okay, it's still a data field. You can do calculated fields just like you could, or lookup fields just like you could on any old data set. But in this case, I'm going to create a field pointing at the underlying contacts property on my customer object, and it's going to be a dataset field. Okay. Now that I've got that, oh, and the other thing I want to do on that, there it is up there. I don't want it to display in the grid, so I'm going to set its visible property to false. Okay. So in my grid, I'll still just have the name. Now down on my Aurelius dataset number 2, I can point that at the field that I've just created. Yeah, the contacts field. So now this should display the detail records for the contacts for whichever is the currently selected master record. Yeah, in the customer grid. So let's just have a quick look. Oh, and what have I done wrong? Okay. I'm trying to shove an integer into a string. Very good, Malcolm. Into string. Okay. Okay, so let's find a couple of... Okay. These guys had no contacts, remember? The only one that had a contact was Acme Inc. So let's go down. He's got none. Oop, there's our number 1. So we've got our master detail relationship set up. I didn't bother setting up a field for this data set, but you saw how to do that before. What's cool, and we'll look at this in a future session, is that you can actually use these for editing, and that will flow back into the object. And then potentially you can optionally get it to automatically flow to save that to the database, or you can take control of when that gets saved back to the database. Yeah. So I know this is a really simple little example, but think about what we've done in however long I've been rabbiting on for, what, 40 minutes or something. We've set up. We had an empty database at the start. We had no business objects. We've created some business objects. We've created the database structure. We've set up Aurelius to be able to load and save these objects into the database. And even though they're simple objects, they're there's a relationship. There's a one-to-many relationship with them. So there's some small level of complexity there. And then we've used both source code, where we were just focused, the source code was all focused on our objects, not on the database. We've used source code to retrieve objects and interact with them. And we've also used data-aware controls to interact with them as well. Yeah. So hopefully that's given you a feel for why I think Aurelius is so cool. In my view, it kind of gives you some of the best of both worlds. It gives you the rad UI approach of that Delphi's always been really good at, so that you can quickly build forms, quickly get functionality going. But it gives you the maintainability of having an object-based structure. Now, later on, I will look at how you tie this into MVVM, because I am a fan of MVVM, but I've purposely kept that out of the equation so far, because you can use Aurelius without MVVM, just as you can use MVVM without Aurelius. Yeah. So we'll cover that in a later section. We'll also go much deeper into how the mapping works, how you can get in and control the mapping at a deeper level. We'll look at live bindings. We'll even later on look at using Aurelius on the server side, or using it in a distributed application on both the server side and the client side. There's some really cool capabilities in there for that. But hopefully this has given you a feel for the fact, the main thing I want to get across here is that object relational mapping isn't some scary thing which is too hard for you to do. If I've been able to bumble my way through it while talking to you all in the last 40 minutes, then you can definitely do it. Okay, cheers, see you next time.